So this is the Umi Plus. It is a 5.5-inch Android smartphone running Android Nougat. It includes a 4000 mAh battery, 4GB of RAM, USB-C, and a 13 megapixel camera. The real kicker though, it's only $170. So I've used my fair share of dirt cheap Android devices in my time, and they all often tell the same story. Massive potential on paper, poor execution in real world performance. The Umi Plus, on the other hand, is a different tale altogether. And in fact, I'd go as far as to say that for what you get, this smartphone is a contender for being the ultimate budget smartphone out right now. Taking a look at the design of the phone, and for $170, it's definitely a surprise. Usually they have to make some compromises and cram some plastic in somewhere to cut on costs, but that's actually not the case here. The phone is an all-metal and glass design, and it reminds me of a heftier version of the OnePlus 3T, and I say heftier because this phone is 8.8mm thick versus the 7.4mm of the OnePlus 3T. The thickness isn't at all an issue though, it does feel beefier in the hand, but the reason for the extra 1.5 mm is well justified. Umi have squeezed a very respectable 4000 mAh battery into this phone, which for that feature alone makes this device very intriguing to say the least. So let's talk about battery life. You'll have no problems getting through a good day and a half with medium to heavy use. 6 hours of screen on time is about par for this phone, which is amazing. And Umi do claim that the phone has fast charging as well, but I think because I'm so used to OnePlus's dash charging, this phone seems slow in comparison. But if you were looking for a phone with stellar battery life, I would contend with you that this phone is definitely worth looking at. So whilst it definitely doesn't feel as premium as a higher end flagship does in the hand, it doesn't slouch in the looks department either. On the front, up the top, we have a 5 megapixel camera, which, let's be honest, isn't that great. And down the bottom, we have a home button and fingerprint sensor. And this thing, on the other hand, puts up a fair fight against my OnePlus 3T. It's definitely not as accurate, so you might get a correct read 8 out of 10 times, but it is just as, if not even faster than the OnePlus when it comes to the speed at which it unlocks your phone. Sandwiched in the middle is a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS display, and again for $170, this thing really does compete right up there against more expensive 1080p displays available. It's sharp, colors seem accurate if not a little blue, and there's a bunch of tuning options as well to really hone in a look you enjoy. It's not the brightest display by any means, and also not the dimmest, but really, at this price point, I feel slightly ashamed for even mentioning those issues at all. Moving to the left side of the phone, and here you'll find a customizable button which can be set up to trigger any application of your choosing, which is an interesting but nice addition. And next to that, you'll find your SIM card slots, which are micro, not nano, and one of these slots also features a micro SD card slot for upgrading the inbuilt storage. On the other side, we have our power button and volume rockers, and each of the buttons are not quite as tactile and clicky as I would have liked, but they definitely don't feel low quality either. On the bottom, we have a USB Type-C charging port as well as 2 speaker grills, but the left one is purely for visual aesthetics. The right speaker is where all the noise gets outputted from, and whilst it does get nice and loud, it is pretty tinny and flat. Moving to the rear side of the device, and here you'll find a 13 megapixel shooter, a dual LED flash, as well as some branding and additional information. Now, when you get a phone as cheap as this, you normally expect it to come shipped with an outdated version of Android, along with a heavy manufacturer skin placed across the device, but that is not the case for the Umi Plus. Believe it or not, it actually has Android 7.0 Nougat installed. It does have a very slight skin across the notification bar, which, to be honest, I'm not really too sure why they've done that other than to be different, but for the most part, you will enjoy a fairly stock experience using this phone, which is a huge selling point. Like most devices these days, you have the option of choosing either on-screen navigation buttons or you can use the home button as well, but the overall experience is fairly zippy without blowing any minds. So it comes shipped with 4GB of RAM, 32GB of internal storage, as well as the Helio P10 chipset, and even though these are some pretty hefty numbers on paper which do result in pretty decent real-world performance, it definitely won't be groundbreaking at all, but then again, I've never found the MediaTek chipsets ever really are. Regardless, given the fact it has virtually a vanilla version of Android running, my best bet is that most will be totally satisfied with the performance of this device. In fact, I myself am very happy with how it performs with day-to-day tasks. So that takes us to the biggest evidence of cost cutting for this phone, which is, of course, the camera. It's 13 megapixels with an f2.4 aperture, and in the absolute best lighting conditions, it can produce some decent shots, which do tend to look over-sharpened, but can still nonetheless pass for okay material. Start creeping to anything resembling a low light shot on the other hand, and things just start to fall apart. photos become blurry and full of grain, it's near impossible to lock focus, and the dynamic range is atrocious. There is an HDR mode to help out with the poor dynamic range, but in all honesty, the shutter speed is really slow when using it, so you're best off just working around the poor dynamic range instead. In saying all of that, for $170, the camera is actually okay and will perform decently in the right conditions. Just do not rely on it as a primary shooter. So if you're looking to buy a phone that is super cheap and yet doesn't feel it both when it comes to design and performance, then I definitely urge you to look into the Umi Plus. Even for a cheap secondary device with incredible battery and good software, this phone is worth considering, and it's why I'm calling it the ultimate budget smartphone you can get right now.